Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to Tag Tuesday. Today I want to do the Book Palate Tag. This tag was created by Fraser Simons over at his channel is called Springboard Springboard Thoughts. This is an original tag he did, and he was kind enough to tag me to do it, so I wanted to do this for Tuesday. You may know that I've kind of backed off of doing tags, which I did quite a lot of for quite a long time. In part, I backed off doing tags because I felt like I was just giving the same answers to a lot of tag questions. So this one, though, appeals to me because it gives me a chance to talk about books that I haven't talked about as much, maybe to talk about some things with my reading life that I haven't talked about ever. And so, I really wanted to do this, and I appreciate Fraser for tagging me to do this. The prompts all have to do with kind of comparing our taste in books and using kind of taste in food or food taste or food palette things to make a comparison to books. Wow, I really butchered that. The good news is I'll leave a link to Fraser's video down below, and you can watch him explain it because he does a far better job than I just did. Anyway, prompt number one is sweet. What is a book that made you excited to read more by that author? Bonus point if it also somehow exemplifies the genre you most like to read. Well, this is a book I talked about just recently, and that is At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. This book made me excited to read more books by David Diop. On top of that, it is what people will refer to as literary fiction. I just call that fiction myself. But it also deals with and is set during World War I, which is one of my favorite kind of reading areas. This is just a great book. I believe it won the International Booker Prize, and even though I didn't read a lot of books from that list or any other maybe books from that list, I thought this was just great and a deserving read. And it is nice and short, but it is densely packed with allusions and all kinds of connections and worthy of a reread, which I hope to give it in December. Prompt number two is sour. What book did you initially dislike, but after a reread you reverse your opinion on? Or what is a book that you loved at one time, but after rereading you found it lacking in some way? Bonus point if the book is in a genre you similarly reverse your position on. I'm not going to get the bonus point this time, and this is a book I've talked about, I believe, several times, and that's The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy. Last year I set out to reread the Border trilogy, and I got to book 2, which is The Crossing. There was a time when I would have told you The Crossing was my second favorite Cormac McCarthy novel, but on rereading it, I changed my mind. The first section is still, I think, just brilliant and beautiful and brutal and great, but after that it kind of becomes meandering and philosophizing, and it just kind of, on a reread, I didn't like the rest of the book that much. So this would be a book where my opinion changed for the negative after a reread. Prompt number 3, bitter. What is a book that you feel is underrated, attacked unjustly by popular mainstream opinion, or is simply misunderstood in some way? Bonus point if it is not a book anyone else has mentioned already that you know of. This book I don't think is necessarily underrated. I don't think it's been unfairly attacked. I just think it's largely been ignored. As a matter of fact, before I made this video, I did a search to see if anyone else on BookTube had done a video, and I found a couple, one from last year, but this is a book that's largely untalked about on BookTube, and that's The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. Walker Percy, a Southern author who also is largely ignored on BookTube, and this is just a really good book, and one I think that deserves to be, reconsidered and reread. It's been a while since I read the book, but essentially the hero of this book, or the main character of this book, is on a quest for meaning. He's on a search for figuring out, does life have any meaning? And if so, what is it? And, what am I supposed to be doing? And he really is, our main character really is an observer, as the name implies. He finds more immediacy and more excitement in movies than he does in real life. And he's also an observer of life in the same way, where he takes kind of a passive approach to life and the events going on around him. He doesn't engage directly, but he just sets out to kind of do that. And in that sense, it's kind of an existentialist novel to a certain extent, even though I'm not sure the author would necessarily embrace that idea. But it's just a really good book, and one I think that is worthy of being reread. Anyway, there you go. That's my book for bitter. I guess I would say, maybe I'm bitter that more people haven't read it. Prompt 4, salty. What is a book that changed how you thought about or related to other people, or that made you realize something about yourself you were not aware of previously? Bonus point, if you choose multiple books from whatever milestones in your life that feel important to you. Well, there are 2 books here that I want to mention. One I talk about, on this channel all the time, and so I'm not going to really go back into that. But one is a little, Penguin classic edition of selected readings from the Upanishads, which I've mentioned several times. I go to for wisdom, for peace, for solace, for reminding myself of self-awareness and things like that. That book's really important to me. And then the other I want to mention is The Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson. Read The Snow Leopard a couple of years ago, I believe, and I have a review of it up on my channel. This is a book about, essentially, where our author goes on a quest in the high Himalayas searching for the snow leopard and hoping to spend time at a Buddhist monastery in the high Himalayas. And really what it is a book, I think, is about is making you aware that the world is not on your schedule, that no matter what you might want or what you might feel like you are owed or deserving, that the world is not under any obligation to meet those needs, and that we as people have to kind of be aware of all those things and to be prepared to just roll with, and to a certain extent, to roll with what happens. That's true of people here too. The people that he goes on this hiking trip with sometimes amaze him, sometimes they disappoint him, sometimes they delight him, and in the same way that the world is on our schedule, we also, I think, have to be aware that other people are not necessarily on our schedule, and therefore, our expectations of them should be kind of based in that idea too. Anyway, that may not be what Matheson intended with the book, but that's kind of what I got out of it, and this is a great book, one more people should read. So then, the next section of Fraser's Book Palate Tag these are optional prompts for the connoisseur, and he says treat the following prompts as if they were different foods. Palates vary depending on what you're consuming, i.e. choose as many as you like. So I do have a choice for all of these. So the first one of these prompts says sophisticated palate. Choose a book from your favorite subgenre or that has your favorite trope or motif, or just go off regarding a bookish nerdy thing you like or enjoy. So I'm just going to go off just briefly on a bookish nerdy thing that I enjoy, and that is short stories. So I know short stories are not necessarily I'm looking for examples. Are not necessarily widely embraced by booktubers, but I love short stories. This is Carson McCullers' The Battle of the Sad Cafe, and other stories, which has great stories in it. I like J.D. Salinger's 9 stories for Esme with Love and Squalor, is one of my favorite short stories ever. I have a video about that. I rave about William Trevor, who I believe is the greatest practitioner of the writing of short stories in, let's say, the second half of the 20th century. This is a copy of his last collection of short stories, appropriately called Last Stories. And then also, not necessarily short stories, but I think I might have mentioned before that I really like Joseph Mitchell's Up in the Old Hotel. These are actually nonfiction stories that Mitchell wrote for The New Yorker, which I just think are often brilliant. I think Joseph Mitchell was a really great writer. But I have a whole section in my bookshelf, 3 of my boxes in the bookshelf over there are just short story collections. Some of them are double stacked and pushed back, and I just really like short stories. Now, I don't read them as much as I used to, but I really like short stories, and so I think, to a certain extent, I'm not sure my taste in short stories is sophisticated, but I do read them a lot and do enjoy them a lot. And so that would be kind of a nerdy area of my reading. I'm not sure I've talked about fully all the time. The next prompt is unrefined palate. What is a book or genre that you consider a guilty pleasure, though you shouldn't feel any actual guilt about reading anything really, but hopefully you know what I mean. I do know what you mean, Fraser, and I do have what I would call kind of, I guess, a guilty pleasure. I don't feel guilty about this at all, as Fraser indicates I shouldn't, but I like books about authors. I like books where authors write about how to write. Somewhere around here I have a copy of Stephen King's On Writing. I have other books about writing. last year or this year, I read George Saunders' A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, kind of a guide to writing of sorts and how he teaches a writing class. I buddy read this with Patrice Jones, and I quite liked it. I also like books that have interviews with writers or writers talking about writers. J.M. Coetzee's Inner Workings, where he has literary essays about the works of other writers. Interviews with writers, Conversations with American Writers. This is an old book I have where the interviewer is Charles Ruas. And then I have the first edition of the Paris Review, interviews with authors. And I just love these kind of chatty discussions with authors and writers and learning about their writing method and how they do things. And to me, that's kind of like cotton candy reading. I love stuff like that. So that would be my answer for unrefined palate. The next prompt says, eclectic palate, what are 3 genres you typically read or gravitate towards? So fiction, I read a lot of fiction. And then, you know, since it's nonfiction November, I'll be more specific because this is what's really come up. I enjoy reading biographies quite a bit. Biographies are one of my favorite genres of reading. I'm reading the biography of W.G. Sebald right now. I'm buddy reading Square Haunting, kind of a group biography, a group of 5 women writers who lived in the Bloomsbury area of Mecklenburg Square, and I'm buddy reading with that with Noelle de Bookrook and Stephanie Cohen, and with Hannah from Hannah's Books. So there's that biography. I particularly like literary biographies or biographies of creative people or movements. They don't have to actually be biographies at all, even though this kind of is. One of my favorite Olivia Lang book is The Trip to Echo Springs on writers and drinking, kind of exploring the relationship between alcohol and writers. It doesn't have to be writers. I like this book, The Existentialist Cafe, Freedom Being in Apricot Cocktails by Sarah Bakewell, which is about the existentialist movement and where it came from and some of the leading figures there. Those are the kind of books that I just really like. And so I think that may be a little bit of an eclectic taste. So I thought that qualified here. And then the last one is maturing palate. What is a genre you've read little of or none of but would like to sample more? What book, if any, prompted this? I want to start reading more horror novels. It's really not a genre I've read before. I've read Stephen Graham Jones' The Only Good Indians and finished at the beginning of this month, and it really worked for me. I really liked it. And so that kind of inspired me to read more horror. I also kind of want to try to read more romance. I think I'm more likely to want to read contemporary romance and Regency romance or anything like that. And I am going to be reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown in December, which I think would count as a romance novel. I do want to tag some people to do this since, Fraser's channel since this is an original tag that Fraser did and tagged me, and I want to make sure I pass the tag on, so I'm going to tag Shelley Swearingen. Shelley has a great channel. She is a very lively, bubbly personality, and she is, I think, one of the people on BookTube who's come around relatively recently who seems the most open to reading and talking about almost anything having to do with books. Also want to tag Beth Ann Berniga Sokolar, and in the hopes that maybe she'll have some interesting kind of science or nonfictions or nature writing books to throw in here. Maybe some really eclectic book about, I don't know, butterflies or bees or something like that. Sorry, Beth Ann, if it seems like I'm limiting you, please do whatever you want to do. I also want to tag my good friend Jack, the Rambling Raconteur, because talk about a wide-ranging reading taste. Jack definitely has that. I also want to tag Rosie Cockshut. Rosie's channel is new to me, and that's only because I'm stupid. A lot of you have known Rosie for some time, but I just really somehow had missed her channel, found it, subscribed, love it, would love to see her do this tag. And then also want to tag Jen the librarian. Jen is a librarian at a school in England. I can't remember exactly the age range of her schools, but I think here in the United States it would be like middle school through high school, like somewhere around the age of 10 or 11-year-olds up through students in high school. She loves Thomas Hardy, which, I don't, but that's okay. And she's been doing a review of all of Hardy's novels, as well as other things. So go check out her channel, but I'd love to see her do this tag as well. Anyway, there you go. There's my version of the Book Palate Tag. I'll leave links to all the channels down below, as well as the prompts. If you want to do the tag, please do it and spread it around. Fraser's made a great tag here. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.